Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Hope you had a beautiful weekend. It is a Monday morning. It is September 15, 2025 here on EWTN, Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. And oh my goodness, so much to talk about and so much news. Have complete coverage and a follow-up to all the developing stories related to the death of conservative speaker and activist Charlie Kirk. A beautiful memorial service and prayer service in Washington, D.C. last night brought in thousands of people. Even buses were coming into D.C. It was held at the Kennedy Center. We'll have a story on it. And it was really quite something to see and to watch. It's the full program, by the way, is on C-SPAN if you want to check it out. I'll be playing a clip during our 2 Cent segment coming up. But so many moving comments and prayers. Speaker Johnson was there, the National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, the press secretary for the president. Caroline Leavitt was there, other representatives and people speaking on behalf of Charlie and encouraging everyone to speak respectfully, but to stand up for what we believe, and especially for our freedoms and for our faith. So we'll discuss that in the news. And then again, I'll bring it up in the second hour of the program if you want to tune in on EWTN Radio Extra. Also coming up today, I think you're going to really enjoy and be inspired by the interview. You may have seen this story that was recently on CatholicNewsAgency.com and also in the Register. The headline read, Diocese Investigates Sainthood Cause of Virginia Father Who Saved His Son. So we're going to talk about this particular case, Joseph Vander Woude, who would have died in a cramped tank surrounded by toxic fumes that his father jumped in, pushing him forward to the surface with his last breath. So it's a powerful, powerful story of what happened to this young man, how his father saved him, and how now he's being investigated for possible sainthood. And it's such an inspiring story. I think we'll be encouraged by it. That's coming up right after the break, actually right after our interview with Matt Swaim, which will be coming up at 9:15. And then, of course, because it is a Monday, we are going to have our scripture verse of the week with our very good friend Gail Buckley from Catholic Scripture Study International. A powerful verse, very timely, from Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. So we will share a little bit more of Gail's insight on that very powerful verse. Let's take a look at the weather before we get started with the news. And there's a ton of news, as you can imagine, this morning. National Weather Service says there's a low pressure system that will track slowly northwestward into the mid-Atlantic region through midweek, bringing a risk for excessive rainfall, gusty winds, shallow coasting, flooding, and rip currents, and also large surf. They're saying unseasonably warm to hot temperatures are still persisting in the mid to upper Mississippi Valley and into the Great Lakes and Northeast. And that will stay with us, by the way. They're saying all the way through Thursday. So again, lots of news developing. We will keep you posted. And I do want to remind you, if you are looking for some beautiful inspiration regarding the beautiful feast date today, Our Lady of Sorrows, September 15, 2025. I don't know if you're familiar with Blessed Jacopani, who was from the beautiful Umbrian town of Todi, which is about 20 minutes south of where Deacon Dom and I hang out in Italy. It's such a powerful story about how a wife's love and her tragic death prompted this man to reorder his life. And he actually is the one, it's a very long story. He actually fell out of favor with the church, and I can't go into the details right now, but eventually was cleared and brought back into the fullness of the church. But it's a powerful story about marriage. It's also a powerful story about Marian intercession. He actually wrote the Stabat Mater. I was talking about that on the Sunrise Morning Show this morning. So, Blessed Jacopani from Todi, and it's also in my Saints in Italy series, EWTN.com/Saints in Italy. Already 4 minutes past the hour, a ton of news, as you can imagine, as I said. So let's get started and see what's happening here on a Monday on EWTN. Thousands gathering at the Kennedy Center in Washington last night for a prayer vigil for conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, who was fatally shot last week at Utah Valley University. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. among those who addressed the mourners.
We were soulmates, we were spiritual brothers, and we were friends.
More than an hour before the prayer vigil was set to begin, USA Today is reporting a line of attendees behind a velvet rope extended out the door and all the way around the building. President Trump, meanwhile, is expected to attend a memorial service this weekend for the 31-year-old Turning Point USA founder. And the governor of Utah says Charlie Kirk's assassination suspect is deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. Republican Spencer Cox telling CNN State of the Union over the weekend that has been learned through interviews involving Tyler Robinson's family and friends.
It is important, again, to understand how someone gets radicalized like this. And in this case, it happened. As much as people wish it wasn't or don't want it to be this, these are the facts.
He added he can confirm the 22-year-old suspect, Robinson's live-in romantic partner, is a male transitioning to become a female, apparently, and that person is cooperating with police. Cox adding investigators are working to try and determine Robinson's motive for murdering Kirk, the conservative activist who was killed by a single gunshot while speaking during a college event in Utah.
This is a direct assault on America, a direct assault on every single one of us. Of course, it's an assault on Charlie, and we love Erica and her kids and his family, but this is us.
Robinson is set to be arraigned on state murder charges tomorrow and is also expected to be charged federally at some point. Meanwhile, Lisa Salvati tells us a nurse is now filing a lawsuit against a New Jersey hospital and a doctor, claiming she was suspended without pay after criticizing a doctor for his alleged remarks about Charlie Kirk.
Lexi Coenzel is suing Englewood Health and Dr. Matthew Jung and others. The New York Post reports Coenzel claims that when the news broke of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's death, Dr. Jung said, "I hate Charlie Kirk. He had it coming. He deserved it." Coenzel says Jung made the remarks in front of 8 other nurses and a patient and reported the incident immediately to management. She also posted on Instagram. Coenzel was suspended without pay and told by her union to look for another job. Englewood Health did not want to comment, while Dr. Jung could not be reached for comment. I'm Lisa Salvati.
A memorial service for conservative activist Charlie Kirk, meanwhile, will be held in his home state of Arizona. Turning Point USA announcing Building a Legacy. Remembering Charlie Kirk will take place at State Farm Stadium coming up this weekend, September 21st. Vice President J.D. Vance escorting Kirk's casket back to Phoenix on Air Force Two last week. Again, Kirk was shot and killed while speaking at a Turning Point event at Utah Valley University on Wednesday, and the memorial service this weekend will be open to the public. The Truth and Liberty Conference opening at Bible College in Woodland Park in central Colorado with a tribute to Charlie Kirk over the weekend, who was set to speak one day after his fatal shooting. Executive Director Richard Harris called him a voice of a generation.
He helped millions of young Americans not only understand the truth, but he gave voice to the knowing that was inside of them.
Organizers say events continue through Saturday and over the weekend under the theme His Truth is Marching On, with evening sessions over the weekend that were streamed online. And Jim Forbes has the latest on the White House, which is asking Congress for $58 million to boost security for the executive and judicial branches.
CBS News reports the funds will go to the U.S. Marshal Service and be used to protect Supreme Court justices. The proposal comes after conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination on Wednesday. U.S. Capitol Police say the department expects over 14,000 threats against lawmakers by year's end. I'm Jim Forbes.
House Speaker Mike Johnson calling on lawmakers to turn down the rhetoric following the assassination of conservative activist Kirk. Johnson telling Fox News Sunday his colleagues have an obligation to set a different tone in political conversations.
You can't call the other side fascists and enemies of the state and not understand that there are some deranged people in our society who will take that as cues to act and do crazy and dangerous things.
He also added the shooting should not stop public discourse, but instead serve as an opportunity to move it forward and advance conversations. In other news this morning at the Sunday Angelus, Pope Leo reflecting on the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, saying the immense love of God transformed an instrument of death into means of life. He said God saved us by showing himself to us, offering himself as our companion, teacher, physician, and friend, even to the point of becoming for us the bread broken in the Eucharist. And to accomplish this work, he said he made use of one of the cruelest instruments of death ever invented by man, the cross. Pope Leo said this is why we celebrate its exaltation, for the love with which God, by embracing the cross for our salvation, transformed it from an instrument of death into means of life, teaching us that nothing can separate us from him and that his love is greater than our sin. The Holy Father concluded the Angelus reflection by inviting the faithful to pray through the intercession of Mary that his saving love may take root and grow within us too, and that we may learn to give ourselves to one another just as God gave himself wholly to us. And the Papal Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls became the setting of a very special event on the evening of September 14th, the commemoration of martyrs and witnesses of the faith in the 21st century. The Pope presiding over the commemoration, together with representatives from various Christian denominations and communities. The event used the Beatitudes from Matthew's Gospel to highlight the lives of the martyrs and their witnesses to Christian values, different members and representatives of the various churches and communities reading prayers. Even today, Pope Leo said, hatred seemed to have permeated every aspect of life, yet brave men and women, servants of the gospel and martyrs of the faith, showing that love is stronger than death through their dedication to their faith. Remembering those who have died for the faith, the Holy Father urging everyone to look to the cross, where Jesus revealed to us the true face of God, his infinite compassion for humanity. Jesus, in coming down in human flesh, he said, carrying the hatred of the world and the suffering of the oppressed. The Trump administration is planning to resume federal funding for research at Harvard, that according to multiple reports, the White House saying it will restore the funds after a judge's ruling that a sweeping blockade of funds was illegal. However, the administration has said it would appeal the judge's decision and maintain its pressure campaign against the university. It's unclear how widespread those restorations were or when the government's payments to Harvard would begin. And the UN is now condemning a massacre in Haiti that has killed at least 40 people in a small fishing village north of Port-au-Prince. Local news there is saying the attack by armed gangs happened Thursday night after the gang's leader was killed. The UN saying in a statement the Secretary General is alarmed by the levels of violence rocking their nation and urges authorities there to ensure the perpetrators are brought to justice. The U.S. State Department saying the gang leader was the head of a gang alliance that is one of the primary causes of instability and violence in Haiti. And another top official in the Biden administration is criticizing the former president, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, telling NBC's Meet the Press Biden should not have run for re-election last year.
If he had made that decision sooner, we might have been better off. But it literally was his decision. Nobody else was able to make that decision.
Buttigieg was responding to an excerpt from former Vice President Kamala Harris's upcoming book where she called Biden's decision to seek re-election reckless. The former secretary insisted he was never part of the process of deciding whether Biden should have run again. And the Cleveland Clinic is reminding parents to limit screen time for their kids who risk facing mental health issues and struggles in school. Pediatrician Gina Robinson says it's recommended children have no more than 2 hours of screen time a day, including tablets, TV, and phones.
Our kids are looking to us as examples. They want structure, they want guidance. So if we want them to have healthy screen habits, we want to role model those too.
Robinson recommending no screen time during meals. She says excessive screen time can result in disruption in homework, sleep, and other part of a child's routine. It is a Monday morning. Hope your day is going well. It's September 15th, 2025. When we come back, we will check in with our good friend Matt Swaim of the Sunrise Morning Show for our Journey Home highlights. And then we're also going to be learning about investigation into a possible new saint some way, somehow down the road. We'll find out. That's coming up this morning on a Monday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, you know him so well from his show, The Sunrise Morning Show with Matt Swaim, and of course Anna Mitchell on news and commentary and color, as we say in the biz. But Mateo, as I call him, also wears many other hats, including doing such great work for the Journey Home program as a producer and also with the Coming Home Network, and joins us on Mondays for Journey Home highlights. Hey, my friend, long time no talk to, like 2 hours, I think it was.
Yeah, I know. Teresa, how are you?
Good. Time flies when you're having fun, have great guests like you. So I understand there is another fantastic show in store for us this evening. Do tell.
Yes, so this can go any direction you want to after I tell you who's on. It's Joshua and Teresa Mangels. Joshua was an Assemblies of God pastor, and I don't know how much you know about Protestant churches, but in places like that, the pastor's wife is like it's like a full-time job too.
Mm-hmm.
You are event organizer, PR department, human resource, you name it. So they were both serving in ministry together in Assemblies of God churches for a number of years. And then they have a really interesting connection. So many of the things that drew them to Pentecostalism were also some of the things that kind of completed them in Catholicism. But when they began to research the early church, they actually, people think that becoming Catholic from a Pentecostal background is wild. They actually felt drawn into like the Byzantine, the Eastern Rite Catholic stuff. And when they eventually came into the church, actually a number of people from their congregation made that journey with them. Of course, I know that you're up from the area where Deacon Alex Jones did that with a Pentecostal church. So, yeah, they've got a ton of cool ways to reflect on those connections between Pentecostalism and Catholicism.
Well, another interesting story, because you mentioned that obviously the wife is doing a lot of work as being married to the pastor, but that was not only their vocation as ministers of the Lord, but that's what they did for a living. So that that was their job, right?
Yeah, it's also all their friends. It's their entire social circle. That's we so often talk about the pastors who come from evangelical congregations and then they become Catholic, and talk about it as we should in terms of them having to figure out, well, what am I going to do for a living? We don't think about it in terms of like, well, we just pulled our kid out of youth group and that's where all their friends were, right? All the weird little things that go when you've basically uprooted yourself. So Catholics have a little bit of trouble understanding this because a lot of Catholics kind of come to Mass. They may or may not say hi to a bunch of people. Sometimes they do. But then, they get in the car and they don't really hang out that long afterwards talking about life and everything. But for Protestants, this is often their entire social circle. Mm-hmm. It's everybody they know, everybody they hang out with, everybody they go to ball games with, everybody who babysits each other's kids. It's a very kind of immersive social experience. So that, again, it's you're not just saying, well, I used to be this one, kind of theology and now this other kind of theology. It's way deeper than that.
So what did they do once they came into the church? Where did they find work? How did they support themselves?
Well, they initially got a job in the church. They go into this a little bit, and that's more their story to tell than mine. And the first place they kind of landed was not the world's greatest fit for them. And this is the other challenge that often happens, is when you've done Protestant ministry, in an Assemblies of God church, it's not like a 1-to-1 ratio. Like, there's not an equivalent of that job in a diocese. Mm-hmm. So what you're bringing is a set of experiences that is from a completely different way of doing church, from an organizational standpoint, not just a theological standpoint. So they're doing some other interesting things now, but they had a few kind of like false starts along the way. And that's one of the other reasons I think their story is going to be very valuable for the people we talk to who serve in ministry and want to become Catholic. And then they get a job in a parish or a diocese and it doesn't work out. And they think, well, there goes my entire ministry career. When in fact, sometimes you just kind of have to fish around. I mean, yesterday was the canonization of anniversary of Mother Seton, who became a Catholic and then had all kinds of false starts before she finally ended up with doing what she was doing with her religious order, doing what she was doing in Catholic education. It is very normal for the people who come into the church to try and fail, sometimes multiple times, before they figure out where God's got them.
It's a real challenge because you do all that research and prayer and you're drawn to the church, you come into the church, and then you have all these struggles. And so I'm sure the doubt must plague them at some point, right?
Of course. I mean, wouldn't it plague you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it.
Asking, yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing. Of course, I know that you know what this is like because you left a pretty successful gig. Kind of stepped out into the unknown. But I do want when our listeners and viewers see these programs to sort of put themselves in these shoes, because so much of what we have as Catholics, if we've been Catholic our whole lives, was sort of given to us. And we're grateful for it, but to kind of see it through the lens of a person who risked some pretty substantial things is, I think, helps us to appreciate what we have and maybe what we've had all along without, kind of understanding the weight of it.
So I love what you do at the Journey Home, the Coming Home Network, because you're such a support system. But do you think more needs to be done in terms of should there be another system available, not only just with an organization like yours, and maybe within the church, like within the Bishops' Conference or something, to help all these new converts, especially people who are walking away from full-time jobs and previous lives. It just seems there should be something else out there in addition to all the great work you're doing, because you can't do it all, right?
No, of course not. Of course not. And honestly, a lot of this stuff varies not only from diocese to diocese, but from case to case, because some of these gentlemen are becoming Catholic at the age of 55. Their kids are all out of the house. They're looking for health insurance, right? They want something that can take care of them and their spouse in their old age, whereas others are coming in really young. Maybe they just had one or two babies, and they need to figure out how to start a career from scratch. And this is why it's so important. And one of the things that we are trying to continue to build is to have the bishops be understanding and be real shepherds of these men who want to do ministry and who live in their own backyards. From diocese to diocese, this is often very radically different. It looks very different in the Bible Belt than it does in the urban centers when one of these pastors becomes Catholic. And so, I think just the broader understanding and the broader support from these dioceses themselves, because they're the ones who actually receive these men and women into the church with their families. They're the ones who are going to be the parishes that these people call home. They're the ones who know what those opportunities are. And that greater awareness is so crucial that when one of these people lands in your parish, lands in your church, you're like, okay, we've got a gold mine on our hands, but we've also got someone with very unique spiritual needs.
I wonder how much the diocese or dioceses and archdioceses know about those people with such dramatic, not that all testimonies aren't dramatic, but if people are leaving an entire income, an entire life, you know what I'm saying? There just seems to be, there has to be more information that's available to help them.
Yeah, and again, different bishops know more. Some bishops are chomping at the bit and are really excited to help out. Some are a little bit intimidated and kind of don't know what to do with some of these men and women, which is fair. Here's a guy who just landed in your diocese as a baby Catholic, but he's also got a master's in divinity and maybe more of a scripture scholar than you are, and you're his pastor. Right. That can be a really kind of intimidating but also exciting thing for a diocese to figure out. So I'm sure that there are bishops listening right now. If you have people like that and you're like, here landed this brilliant person with a really quirky situation, what do I do? Please call us. Yeah. Because we work with, we've had, we're on pace to have 150 new ones contact us this year for the first time.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we're glad you're there, Matt, both on the air in the morning and, of course, with the Coming Home Network and the Journey Home. If people want information on the Coming Home Network, where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely. chnetwork.org. Again, chnetwork.org. Some 1,700 written and video testimonies, including your own episode of the Journey Home team. So there you go.
Great stuff. All right, my friend, great to talk to you this morning and look forward to, God willing, checking in with you next week. Matt Swaim, of course, of the Sunrise Morning Show, the Journey Home, and the Coming Home Network. These stories are so important, and sometimes I think we feel like, at least I do, it really wakes me up when I watch these episodes because, as Matthew said, I think we can be a little bit maybe spoiled, spoiled kids on the block as we were born into this church with so many gifts. We cannot take it for granted, and we need to help those coming into the church as well. We'll be right back. Great story coming up. The diocese investigating a sainthood cause for a man who saved his son. Of course, we're talking a lot about saints lately with the recent canonization last weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, of Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis. And we have an American Pope, and wouldn't it be something for our American Pope to someday down the road, God willing, canonize a fellow American? Well, right now a diocese is investigating the sainthood cause of a Virginia father who saved his son. On the phone with us is another one of his sons, and his name is Chris Vander Woude, and he's going to give us some background about his dad and tell us the story that led to this investigation. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a great joy and honor to be here.
Really, I can only imagine. So give us the background on your father and why this whole cause now is being investigated, if you would.
Sure. I'd love to. The short background is Dad. I'm one of 7 sons. He was military, flew commercially, and moved to Virginia in '81. And just a very simple, ordinary man. He was a farmer, a pilot, a mechanic, a coach that did his daily duty to the best of his ability, and really tried to love God and love of neighbor and live that out. And on September 8, 2008, the birthday of our Blessed Mother anniversary, which we just celebrated, he gave his life to save my youngest brother, Joseph, who has Down syndrome. He's the youngest of the 7 sons, and he had fallen into the septic tank on my family's farm where we grew up, and my dad jumped in and was able to save him along with the help of another workman there and my mom. Unfortunately, my dad did not make it out, and very powerful, obviously, and we're struck by the words of Christ that said, "No greater love has a man than to lay down his life for his friends." So 4 years ago, a group of men who had never heard the story of my father came across it and were so moved. They wanted to pursue spreading his story and possibly the option for him to be canonized, and especially in light of the 2017 motu proprio from Pope Francis, which stated that the offer of one's life is a new path to sainthood in addition to heroic virtue and martyrdom. So these men started the Tom Vander Woude Guild about 4 years ago and have been, working behind the scenes to gather testimony and do interviews and just tell his story whenever possible, just because it's such a powerful story and I think a story of inspiration and hope, because he was a normal, simple father and husband that just did the ordinary really well until he was called to do something extraordinary with the grace of God. And so in the last 9 months, the Diocese of Arlington, where we live and where my parents lived and where my dad died in, has taken some initial steps to investigate whether or not his cause should be opened. It is not open right now. They have taken the steps of signing a contract with a postulator in Rome who kind of oversees the entire project. They've agreed to be the petitioner should a request be sent to Rome to open his cause, and they announced a vice postulator in the diocese to oversee all the investigation and the work that we do in the diocese. So, and as a result, I'm working with the Guild to just spread awareness of Dad's story and help the diocese by doing interviews and whatever I can to help them, and whether or not Dad, his cause opens or if he's made a saint, that's in God's hands. But I do believe his story resonates with so many people in today's postmodern world.
So what does it mean to you, your family? Because when you got the news that your father was a very humble man, what do you think he'd say about all of this?
He's probably a little irritated and mad with all the attention. Many described him as a St. Joseph figure, kind of quiet behind the scenes, but always looking for ways to help people, whether or not that was the parish that helped start and working behind the scenes, whether or not that the high school and coaching and building this or that, whether or not it was just quietly doing what a husband and father is called to do, either in the military or in the commercial world. So, I don't know. He's probably not too thrilled because he did like to be in the background. But at the same time, obviously, I think he would recognize that in the world we live in, hopeful, inspirational, powerful stories, especially regarding manhood and family life, are important for everyone to be aware of and hopefully aim at.
Yeah, I was going to say, you make such a great point, because look at the state of marriage and the problems in fatherhood. If you look in prison, if you look at the abortion issue, so much is connected to a lack of fatherhood. And here your father is such a good witness. It's having such an impact, even if the cause is never officially opened, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Dad's life is, the simple things. Having Joseph, who was Down syndrome, and that example that we saw Dad and Mom pour their heart and soul into his development, which goes contrary to the world right now, especially with those with handicap, where, countries are trying to eradicate them. And not only that, but Dad, I think the power of a simple, holy life. Dad was a man of faith. He had a simple, profound faith that I think came from his farming days of just trust that God is who he said he was, and trust in God's promises and his plan, and just do your daily duty. And so I think there's a lot of power in doing the ordinary well. And I think we can see that in our world today, possibly, where, maybe we don't have enough of us just doing a quiet holy hour like my dad did, or saying the rosary on our knees. And we don't have to aim for the extraordinary. I think also we just aim for the ordinary and doing our daily duty with God's grace. There's tremendous power in that.
Tell us about the witness of his funeral. I understand more than 1,500 people attended.
Yeah, his viewing and his funeral were quite impressive. The viewing lasted over 5 hours. There's one man who flew with my dad who stood in line for 3 hours. He's not even Catholic, and he just said, he kept telling himself, man, this is the way to live your life if people who don't even know you come to pay your respects. The funeral, which actually was today, Our Lady of Sorrows, 17 years ago. Again, he died on the feast of the birth of Our Lady, and his funeral was on Our Lady of Sorrows, and he had a tremendous devotion to Lady in the Rosary. So, God doesn't work in ironies. But, his funeral was close to 2,000 people. The church was filled to capacity about 45 minutes before. There were 75 priests, including the bishop at the time, the Arlington Bishop Laverty. And at that parish, which my dad and mom were very instrumental in helping and volunteering, my dad was in charge of the altar boys. And so there were over 80 altar boys that served the Mass.
Wow.
And just a tremendous outpouring of the community, and people moved by, not only his life and his example, but obviously his powerful death.
It's just amazing, but the simplicity of his life, but the beautiful simplicity of the way he knew his role as a father, as a husband, and had lived sacrificially as he did. And it's just so incredible, because we need that so badly today. It's interesting, just last week, Chris, I did an interview with regular guests of ours, Julie and Greg Alexander, who are from a marriage ministry. And we're talking about how Taylor Swift, because she's engaged now, people are very, very interested in marriage again all of a sudden. And yet here is your father, someone living in the background, doing what he's supposed to do, and I think he is having, God willing, hopefully an even bigger impact than someone like a Taylor Swift. Chris Vander Woude, whose father, the cause for possible sainthood is being investigated right now, hasn't been open yet, but it is under investigation. More on this amazing story of faith and family when we come back on a Monday. 38 minutes past the hour on a Monday. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection, a fascinating story of faith, fatherhood, family. Wow. Diocese investigating sainthood cause of a Virginia father who saved his son. That's the title of an article that was posted last week on the Catholic News Agency website. You can check it out. We're talking with Tom Vander Woude's fifth son, 7 boys in the family. And Chris, we were talking before the break, the simplicity, but the beauty of your father's life and the witness. It is so needed right now, is it not?
Yeah, I believe it is. I think especially Dad's just the sacrifice day in and day out, and that's really what makes Dad's story, I think, so powerful. As people ask, how was he able to give that last act of sacrifice to save his son? And the family likes to say that's how he lived his life. He was always looking for ways to serve and sacrifice, even better if it was out of the limelight and unnoticed. And so I think a life like that just builds in virtue and character and habits that, you do the right thing. And at the end of his life, God called him to do something extraordinary. And look, he had built up that virtue day in and day out, cooperating with God's grace and doing the little things, and that led to him being able to do something truly amazing.
So when you say the little things, what was it about his daily faith practices that left such an impression, do you think?
Sure. I mean, things that were very quiet, simple as from 1972 on, my parents made us say the family rosary, and it didn't matter what we had going on that night. We played a lot of sports. we all said the rosary as a family, and Dad was always saying it on his knees. And as a child, especially as a son, to see your father humble himself before God, not only just to pray, but to pray on his knees, no matter what he went through that day. Whether or not it was his smile, Mother Teresa has a couple quotes about what a gift a smile is. And my dad had this joyful smile. He was gentle. St. Francis de Sales has a quote about real strength and gentleness, and I think that epitomizes that. He was approachable, he was gentle, yet he was also firm and just. And he just treated people, I think, with a real Christian charity of not judging. You would get justice sometimes, but just a willingness to engage and help and serve, and no matter what the cost was and no matter who it was. I mean, that's what, at the funeral, one of the quotes that somebody said is, a lot of people are here because they know that if they were in that septic tank, your dad would have jumped in for them. That's just the kind of man he was.
Wow. So in terms of his faith growing up, he grew up in a strong Catholic family. What was that like for him in his early years?
Yeah, he grew up on a big farm in South Dakota. He was born in 1942, and his parents were faithful Catholics. But, I think also being a farmer, there's a simple farm-like faith, I think. You have to trust in God, but and know that God will take care of you, especially when it comes to crops and animals. But yeah, he grew up going to Sunday Mass. Obviously, the family would say the Rosary in October. He was an altar boy, went to the Catholic high school. That's where he met my mom. My mom was a city girl. He was the farm boy. And I think just throughout their life, Mom and Dad just continued to build on their faith. Saying the Rosary during the month of October growing up turned into saying the Rosary every day. The Eucharist, the Holy Eucharist, devotion to the Eucharist, both from adoration, not only as a family. The family, we made a holy hour as a family once a week, and then also Dad and Mom made their own holy hours. And so just that simple, devotion to Christ in the Eucharist, both at Mass, the reverent adoration, devotion to Blessed Mother and the Rosary, I think that just really built up his faith and just a desire to serve God and to love him day in and day out.
And what a witness as a couple, praying together as a couple, right?
Yeah, Mom and Dad were they were a team. The holiness, praying together, ensuring that the family, Father Peyton says the family that prays together stays together. And I do believe Mom and Dad put their trust in that and led us in prayer. They didn't just say your prayers. They did it with us. They led us. They took us to confession. We went to Mass as a family. And so, yeah, great example, and also of just a great marriage, especially in today's world from a family standpoint where it's totally under attack, and a great example with Joseph of when you give of yourself, you can find yourself, and it allows you to love more deeply.
Well, and you said early on, we were talking about, the witness for marriage, a witness for life, your brother who had Down syndrome, and what they're doing now in the world of the culture of death, and how so many lives, unless they're absolutely perfect, and the people get to decide who's perfect and who should live and who should die. That's what some people want. But what a witness on so many levels, Chris. I mean, seriously, marriage, family, fatherhood, life, it's so much. And just because it's being investigated, so who knows, God's will could be just that your father, there'd be a focus on your father because of the way he lived, whether this investigation is opened or not, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's why I believe Dad's story is so inspirational and powerful, because it does touch so many factors, whether or not it's manhood, family life, the pro-life element, just like you said.
This is just awesome. Well, thank you for your witness this morning. It's obvious the beautiful impact that your father and mom had on you, or having on you. How do we find out more information about the investigation that's currently ongoing? They haven't opened it officially, but the process and what's being done right now, where do we find that?
Sure. The Tom Vander Woude Guild, so the website is tvwguild.org. There's a lot of information of where the process is, reporting prayer favors, more information right there on the website.
All right, give us that one more time.
It's T as in Tom, V as in Vander, W as in Woody, Guild.org.
Well, keep us posted. I know we'll be following this story very closely here at all of our Catholic media outlets, EWTN's Catholic News Agency, The Register, and of course here on Catholic Connection. But what a story. Thank you for sharing it. Congratulations for your father's life being out there for so many people to see and, God willing, emulate, right?
Yes, that's the hope. And thank you so much for having me on and for being able to share his story.
Sure. Appreciate it, Chris. God bless you.
Thank you.
And don't forget, again, to check out the story on the Catholic News Agency that was posted last week. And we continue our conversation this morning on a Monday, as we always do, with our very own Gail Buckley from Catholic Scripture Study International. Good morning, my dear. Happy Monday to you.
Good morning, T. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
Our scripture verse is from Proverbs. And just a minute. I'm so sorry that something came in my... would you read the scripture verse?
Sure.
Sure. I've got
it's Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. Let me read it again for our listeners. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. Powerful verse.
Yes, it is. And I think it's very appropriate. This verse is very appropriate for what's going on now, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And that's why I chose this verse today. Mm-hmm. Charlie, was, as we all know, was a great influencer and had a great faith. And this verse, seems to speak simply about reputation, but how people will be remembered after their death. But actually, it carries a much deeper message, I think, about the kind of life we're building every single day. I chose it because I think it's so appropriate right now. Think about the first part. The memory of the righteous is blessed. The writer is saying that when a person, lives a righteous life, a life that seeks to honor God, and when they act with integrity and show kindness and generosity and all, their memory doesn't take away their past, and instead it becomes a source of blessing. And many will remember them with gratitude. For example, it continues to shape lives long after they're gone, and that's certainly true about Charlie. And even though he may no longer be with us physically, the memory of his faithfulness is alive, and it inspires us. And that's what this scripture means when it says the memory is blessed. And then you go to the second part where it says but the name of the wicked will rot. Well, those are strong words. The writer paints a picture of a life lived for self, without thought of God or others. And the result is not only that their influence is short-lived, but their name, begins to decay. Instead of being remembered with gratitude, they'll either be forgotten or remembered with shame. And, it's a sobering truth. Every one of us, in a sense, we're writing our own obituary while we're living. And the choices we make today are shaping how we will be remembered. And this is not, it sounds like I'm talking about reputation, but it's not about reputation. This is about, seeking human approval, or it's not about that, or seeking to build a name for ourselves. It's about something deeper. It's about, living a life aligned with God's word, a life that reflects his character. And when we honestly, and humbly walk with God and serve others with love, like Charlie did, well, we are, remembered by millions of people, or maybe we only remember by a few, like our family and friends. But our memory will be a blessing, because people will, look back and say, that I remember her with love, and she pointed me towards God. And that's what Charlie did. I'm sorry, I'm emotional. I've really been emotional over this about Charlie. And this verse, I think, also encourages us in our grief. When we lose a loved one who walked with God, we discover how true these words are. The memory.
Well, it's been so upsetting, and I'll tell you, Deacon Dom and I went away for the weekend for our anniversary, and yet at the same time we couldn't stop talking about it. And every time we prayed, we prayed for the country. We prayed for Charlie Kirk, for his family, for his wife, for his children, for the man who was arrested for committing this horrible act of violence and assassinating him. And it's a gut punch to the body of Christ, and that's why we feel this way. But I think we have to remember that if you see what's happening now, I'm going to talk about this in the next hour of the program. It is incredible They've had 32,000 plus requests to open new chapters of Turning Point USA on high school and college campuses. 32,000.
It's amazing. And T, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in guidances. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that God inspired Charlie to name his organization Turning Point, because I believe, God knew this was going to happen, and that this is truly a turning point for our nation. I pray it is. I pray it is that through his death, many more people will come to know Jesus, and many more people would. We need this desperately. Our country has been in such a dark time, and they've thrown God out of schools, prayer, and all that. And I'm praying this will be a turning point for us, and that Charlie's death, God can bring good out of bad things. Look at Joseph's life, where his brother sold him into slavery, and he was in prison, but then he became a leader, and he not only saved his own brother's lives, but many others going through a famine. So God can bring good out of bad circumstances, and I believe that's what's happening now. I pray it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think also the way people are responding, I'm going to talk about this again next hour. Thousands showed up at the Kennedy Center last night for a memorial service, yes. and the line was around the building before it began, buses coming in. And again, so many thousands of requests for information to start a new chapter of Turning Point USA. So I think this is a way for us to respond. We respond in prayer. We don't respond with violence. We respond with love. And there have been some cases where violence has broken out at various events, but we can't be the ones involved in that. There shouldn't be anything, but we have to stand strong in our faith and to stand strong in a loving way. And I think for the most part, that's happening around the country.
Right. And as a Christian, I feel for the man that shot him, this young man. I mean, he's been influenced by left media and social, and it's terrible. But he chose. We all have free will, and he chose to follow Satan instead of God.
We have to pray for his soul, too. Gail, we're out of time. Great discussion this morning. Appreciate the verse. And we'll be right back to let you know what's coming up in more detail in the second hour of Catholic Connection. Stay tuned. Having a blessed Monday, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. Pray for us. Well, this powerful verse that Gail shared with us for discussion this morning, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7, the memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. It applies not only, of course, she was talking about the tragedy of the Charlie Kirk shooting, but also the man we were discussing earlier with his son, Vander Woude, Tom Vander Woude. The memory of the righteous is blessed. I mean, if you think about what Chris was saying about his dad, 1,500 at his funeral. How many altar boys, how many priests, the impact he's had. And now it's possible that an investigation for the cause of sainthood could be opened on his father's behalf. So, there's a lot of righteous people in the world that are doing good things. Never forget that. And make sure, as difficult as it is right now in our country, to hang on to that. And we see the real powerful output and this outpouring of support for Charlie Kirk and his work. And we're going to be talking about that in the next hour. There was a beautiful memorial service that was held in D.C. It was packed. We had the story in the news. And Richard and I pulled a clip, which I thought was excellent, from Tulsi Gabbard. We're going to play that, National Intelligence Director, who knew him and was at many, many events with him. And she talks about how we need to witness right now. And we're responsible, and we have to use our time wisely. So we'll discuss that in our 2 Cents segment after the news and the weather on EWTN Radio Extra. And then we're going to take a look at teen pregnancy and post-abortion depression. There is some new reports out. And again, this is a story that is not told, it is not explained, and needs to be out there. It'll be discussed by Dr. Anna Nordin. She joins us coming up in the second hour as well. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. More Catholic Connection coming up on EWTN Radio Extra on a Monday.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamio, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
And it's a Monday morning. It's September 15th. Thank you for tuning into the second hour of Catholic Connection, EWTN's production of Catholic Connection here on EWTN Radio Extra. And don't forget the beautiful feast day today. Our Lady of Sorrows, pray for us. It is a beautiful day. And as I mentioned in the first hour, if you want to know a little bit more about the beautiful dedication that we usually hear during Lent, and especially on Fridays during Lent and Good Friday, and when we're doing the Stations of the Cross, the Stabat Mater, at the cross, her station keeping, that beautiful, beautiful hymn was written by Blessed Jacopani. He is buried in Todi in Umbria, very close to where Deacon Dom and I live part-time. And it's a beautiful story about how his wife, actually in her tragic death, awakened his Catholic faith and turned his entire life around. And he wrote this beautiful hymn to Our Lady. He was very Marian. It's a very interesting story about someone who becomes this zealot after living a very secular and very busy professional life in the limelight as an orator and a lawyer. This is centuries ago, of course, in medieval times. But his wife died tragically, and he realized that she had been praying for him because it happened during an event in the town. They were having this festival, and there was a tragedy where people sitting in the stands, however, I'm describing it in modern language, but there was a collapse where people were sitting and she died. And when he went to retrieve her body, he noticed that she'd been wearing a hair shirt. And then he discovered notes of hers in a diary about how she had been praying for her husband who had fallen away from his faith. And that changed his life dramatically. And he became very zealous of the faith, to the point where he was so zealous, he actually had to be removed from the faith. He was excommunicated for a while because he was going against the Pope. But eventually he confessed and turned his life around again in the sense of understanding the role of the Church and the Holy Father, and then made right with the Church and came back into full communion, and then started writing even more. He was a great poet, a great speaker, but he was the one responsible for the Stabat Mater. And if you get the Magnificat, if you follow that every day, you'll actually see it in the readings for today. They bring that in for the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. So it's a beautiful feast day. If you're not familiar with it, please do check it out. It's very important to me and our family because my father died on the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows 15 years ago. And he was born on the Annunciation. His middle name was Annunziato, Michele Annunziato Schillaci. So imagine that Italian name. But I always thought it was so beautiful that he was born on the Annunciation and died on the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows, and the Blessed Mother had him covered his entire life. So, as a matter of fact, in his tombstone, we have beautiful images of the Blessed Mother. So, very meaningful, beautiful, beautiful feast day. When we come back after the news and the weather this morning, we're going to hear a powerful clip from the National Director of Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, talking about Charlie Kirk. Last night in Washington, thousands, not hundreds as some of the media are reporting, but thousands of people gathering at the Kennedy Center to remember this dynamic, young, conservative speaker, activist, and very, very faithful man, a faithful Christian, pro-life warrior to the nth degree, Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated last week in Utah while speaking at a college campus. And she talks about his life and legacy, but also what type of legacy are we going to leave behind? And she was one of the many speakers last night. And then speaking of life, Dr. Anna Nordin, who's going to be a guest, of course, on Jim and Joy, she's going to be joining us in studio, and she has an update on some information, a very important story, post-abortion research, and particularly we'll be talking about teen pregnancy and post-abortion depression. So that is our program today for a Monday morning on this, again, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. Let's take a look at the weather. We can expect to see low-pressure systems tracking slowly northwestward into the mid-Atlantic region through midweek, bringing a risk for excessive rainfall, gusty winds, some flooding, rip currents, and large surf. And again, this is a mid-Atlantic region, unseasonably warm to hot temps, persisting in the mid to upper Mississippi Valley into the Great Lakes in the northeast, and that will happen all the way through Thursday. It is a Monday morning. You are listening to the second hour of Catholic Connection, so let's check the news. A busy news morning here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Well, as we mentioned, we will be covering this further in our Two Ascents segment in about 15 minutes, but thousands gathering at the Kennedy Center in Washington last night for a special prayer vigil for conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. He was fatally shot at Utah Valley University last week. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. among those speaking and addressing the mourners.
We were soulmates, we were spiritual brothers, and we were friends.
More than an hour before the prayer vigil was set to begin, a line of attendees behind a red velvet rope extended all the way out the door and around the building. President Trump, meanwhile, expected to attend a memorial service for the 31-year-old Turning Point USA founder on Sunday in Arizona. And the governor of Utah says Charlie Kirk's assassination suspect is deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. Republican Spencer Cox telling CNN State of the Union over the weekend that's what's been learned through interviews involving Tyler Robinson's family and friends.
It is important, again, to understand how someone gets radicalized like this. And in this case, it happened. As much as people wish it wasn't or don't want it to be this, these are the facts.
Cox adding he can confirm the 22-year-old Robinson's live-in romantic partner is a man identifying as a woman and apparently transitioning to become a female. And he's cooperating with police. Cox saying investigators are working to try and determine Robinson's motive for murdering Kirk, the conservative activist who was killed by a single gunshot while speaking last week in Utah.
This is a direct assault on America. A direct assault on every single one of us. Of course, it's an assault on Charlie, and we love Erica and her kids and his family. But this is us.
Robinson is set to be arraigned on state murder charges tomorrow and is also expected to be charged federally at some point. Meanwhile, Lisa Salvati reports a nurse is filing suit against a doctor and a hospital, and she's very upset at what happened shortly after the killing of Charlie Kirk. She says she was suspended without pay after criticizing the doctor for his alleged remarks about Kirk.
Lexi Coenzel is suing Englewood Health and Dr. Matthew Jung and others. The New York Post reports Coenzel claims that when the news broke of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's death, Dr. Jung said, "I hate Charlie Kirk. He had it coming. He deserved it." Coenzel says Jung made the remarks in front of 8 other nurses and a patient and reported the incident immediately to management. She also posted on Instagram. Coenzel was suspended without pay and told by her union to look for another job. Englewood Health did not want to comment, while Dr. Jung could not be reached for comment. I'm Lisa Salvati.
Here's some more information on the memorial service this weekend for Kirk. Turning Point USA announcing Building a Legacy. Remembering Charlie Kirk will take place at State Farm Stadium this weekend, September 21st. Vice President J.D. Vance, of course, escorted Kirk's casket back to Phoenix on Air Force 2 on Thursday. Kirk was shot and killed while speaking again at a Turning Point event at Utah Valley University. That happened on Wednesday. And the Truth and Liberty Conference over the weekend opening up at Bible College in Woodland Park in central Colorado with a tribute to Charlie Kirk, who was set to speak one day after his fatal shooting. Executive Director Richard Harris called him a voice of a generation.
He helped millions of young Americans not only understand the truth, but he gave voice to the knowing that was inside of them.
And organizers say events continued through Saturday under the theme His Truth is Marching On, with evening sessions that were streamed online as well. And Jim Forbes tells us that the White House is now asking Congress for $58 million to boost security for the executive and judicial branches.
CBS News reports the funds will go to the U.S. Marshal Service and be used to protect Supreme Court justices. The proposal comes after conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination on Wednesday. U.S. Capitol Police say the department expects over 14,000 threats against lawmakers by year's end. I'm Jim Forbes.
House Speaker Mike Johnson calling on lawmakers, meanwhile, to turn down the rhetoric following the assassination of Kirk. Johnson telling Fox News Sunday his colleagues have an obligation to set a different tone in political conversations.
You can't call the other side fascists and enemies of the state and not understand that there are some deranged people in our society who will take that as cues to act and do crazy and dangerous things.
He also added the shooting should not stop public discourse, but instead, he says, serve as an opportunity to move it forward and advance conversations. In other news this morning at the Sunday Angelus, the Pope reflecting on the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, saying the immense love of God transformed an instrument of death into a means of life. The Pope said God saved us by showing himself to us, offering himself as our companion, teacher, physician, and friend, even to the point of becoming for us the bread broken in the Eucharist. And to accomplish this work, the Pope said, he made use of one of the cruelest instruments of death ever invented by man, the cross. Pope Leo said this is why today we celebrate its exaltation, For the love with which God, by embracing the cross for our salvation, transformed it from an instrument of death into a means of life, teaching us that nothing can separate us from him, and that his love is greater than our sin. The Holy Father concluding his Angelus reflection by inviting the faithful to pray through the intercession of Mary that his saving love may take root and grow within us too, and that we too may learn to give ourselves to one another just as he gave himself wholly to all. And the Papal Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls in Rome becoming the setting of a very special event on the evening of September 14th, last night, the commemoration of martyrs and witnesses of the faith in the 21st century. Pope Leo presiding over the event together with representatives from various Christian denominations and communities. The event using the Beatitudes from Matthew's Gospel to highlight the lives of the martyrs and their witnesses to Christian values. Different members and representatives of the various churches and communities read the prayers. Even today, Pope Leo said, hatred seemed to have permeated every aspect of life, yet brave men and women, servants of the gospel and martyrs of the faith, showing that love is stronger than death through their dedication to their faith. Remembering those who have died for the faith, the Holy Father urging everyone to look to the cross, where Jesus revealed to us the true face of God, his infinite compassion for humanity. Jesus, he said, in coming down in human flesh, carrying the hatred of the world and the suffering of the oppressed. The Trump administration is planning to resume federal funding for research at Harvard University. According to multiple reports, the White House says it will restore the funds after a judge's ruling that a sweeping blockade of funds was illegal. However, the administration has said it would appeal the judge's decision and maintain its pressure campaign against the school. It's unclear how widespread the restorations were or when the government's payments to Harvard would begin. And the UN is now condemning a massacre in Haiti that killed 40 people in a small fishing village just north of Port-au-Prince. Local news there reporting the attack that happened Thursday night after the gang's leader was killed. The UN said in a statement, Secretary General is alarmed by the levels of violence rocking Haiti and urges authorities on the island nation to ensure the perpetrators are brought to justice. The U.S. State Department says the gang leader was ahead of a gang alliance that is one of the primary causes of instability and violence in Haiti. And another top official now in the Biden administration is criticizing the former president. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg telling NBC's Meet the Press Biden should not have run for re-election.
If he had made that decision sooner, we might have been better off. But it literally was his decision. Nobody else was able to make that decision.
Buttigieg was responding to an excerpt from former Vice President Kamala Harris's upcoming book, where she called Biden's decision to seek re-election reckless, but Buttigieg says he insisted he was never part of the process of deciding whether Joe Biden should have run for office again. It is a Monday morning. Hope you're doing well. September 15th, 2025, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. Pray for us. Take a look at a beautiful, powerful service last night, remembering Charlie Kirk. Took place at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. We'll have the details coming up. Welcome back. It's Catholic Connection. It's 16 minutes past the hour. It's a Monday, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. Pray for us, a beautiful feast day and an important one, the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. I'll tell you what, it is incredible to see the outpouring of love and support and the interest, additional interest, I should say, in the ministry that was begun by the very young Charlie Kirk when he was only in his teens. He died assassinated last week in Utah while speaking at a college campus. A single gunshot wound took his life. It's just incredibly sad. And the whole country, I think, is realizing that enough is enough with this awful, how do I say this? The violence and the verbiage used by some people and the attacks verbally against people that turn into physical attacks. It's just a time for us to take a breath and to regroup and to make sure that we as Christians, as fellow Christians, are responding correctly with love. And that's why I wanted to play a clip of the National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, a beautiful statement she gave last night at this prayer service, prayer vigil, and memorial for Charlie Kirk, which even according to secular media, USA Today's report, which caught my attention, said thousands were in attendance. Not hundreds, as some other media outlets are reporting, but thousands, to the point where they were lined outside and around the building to get in. And his organization, Turning Point USA, has received some 32,000 plus requests for information on how to start a new chapter of Turning Point at its high school or at a college campus, wherever. But 32,000 requests. I think 900 chapters exist right now. So imagine how many more will soon exist because of the interest and the attention being paid to this awful, awful situation that is definitely Romans 8:28. So we have this clip, and Richard's going to roll it, but listen to the beautiful words of Tulsi Gabbard and how she calls all of us to responsibility to make sure that we are reacting with love. Here we go.
Ultimately, for every one of us, the time that we have in this world is temporary. Our time will come, sooner or later. And so the critical question that we have for ourselves is, whatever time we have, what are we doing with it? How are we making the most of every day that we have? And Charlie Kirk, every single day, carried out his mission, motivated by his faith in Jesus Christ and his unwavering dedication to defending our God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Because of his commitment and dedication, his impact here and around the world is profound. And it is a beautiful thing to see it playing out now. Probably like many of you, I had the privilege of joining Charlie at some of his different campus visits, and it was truly something to behold, because he did things that no one else would do. As I sat with him in the very first time, huge crowd, thousands and thousands of, yes, students, but faculty members and people of all different ages. And the first 2 or 3 people who had stood in line waiting to say something to Charlie were very kind, and they thanked him for his work. They praised him. They talked about how he positively impacted their lives. It was powerful to witness and to see. But Charlie wasn't there for praise. He would call to the crowd and say, "Hey, who here disagrees with me? Come to the front of the line." He listened carefully to everyone. Even when others in the crowd booed whoever was speaking, he told them to be quiet and to let this person speak, to show them respect. And he engaged in that lively debate. He encouraged it, he welcomed it, and he inspired it in others. Not belittling them, not arguing just to argue, but to have a real, sincere dialogue. You know, I've said many times, and every soldier lives this fact, this truth. I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death for your right to say it. Charlie lived by this principle. Charlie lived by the principle that no matter how horrible another person's speech may be, their ideas must be defeated by better ideas, not by resorting to violence. Charlie was killed on September 10th. On September 11th, we observed the 24th anniversary of the Islamist terrorist attack on our country 24 years ago. Now, these events have something in common. They were both carried out by those who hold on to ideologies that cannot stand up to scrutiny and challenge, so they feel that their only recourse is to commit an act of violence to silence those who oppose them, and to intimidate and terrorize others into silence. This is the definition of terrorism. We cannot allow ourselves to be terrorized into silence. We need to live Charlie Kirk's example, the example that he set, that are captured by the words of Reverend Martin Luther King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. This was more than a quote from an icon in our past to Charlie. He lived this every day, and he inspired countless people around the world to do the same. And in the wake of this tragedy, this has been what, to me, has been beautiful to see how today and, Sunday football games all across the country, these teams were leading moments of silence, putting pictures of Charlie up on the big screen, having a flyover with the flags flying at half-staff to honor the impact of Charlie's life, how he positively inspired countless people, and how it's up to us to continue Charlie's legacy. It's time for us every day in how we engage with others to choose to live aloha, love, respect. From my home state of Hawaii, the reason why we greet each other with the word aloha is because of its deeply spiritual meaning. It doesn't actually mean hello or goodbye. We greet each other with aloha because what we are really saying when we say aloha is, I see you as a child of God, and I respect you as such. It is to recognize that God is all-powerful and God's love is all-powerful. Love is not weak. Respect for others is not weak. There is nothing more powerful than love. Living aloha, living that love and respect. It doesn't mean being a pacifist or rolling over when our ideas are challenged or when our freedoms are under attack. Actually, it's the exact opposite. It means standing up, fueled by love, to defeat hate, to defeat that evil and that darkness, and to speak the truth and defend our fundamental freedoms that are granted to us by God.
Amen. That was Tulsi Gabbard, the National Director of Intelligence for the Trump administration, speaking last night at a beautiful memorial for Charlie Kirk. So many people that spoke. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, the press secretary for the president, Tulsi Gabbard, and so many others, elected officials and others. I want to make a note of the reading for today. Of course, we know this is a Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. But if you look at the first reading, just go to, for example, USCCB for the Memorial of Our Lady of Sorrows, if you haven't done your readings yet. The first reading from 1 Timothy chapter 2, where St. Paul talks about prayers, right? First of all, he has supplications, prayers, petitions, and thanksgiving being offered for everyone. The last line of that reading, listen to this. St. Paul says, "It's my wish then that in every place that men should pray, they should lift up holy hands without anger or argument." We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Monday morning. It's September 15, 2025. Great to be with you. And as I mentioned earlier in the first hour of the program, if you're interested in hearing more of that very powerful memorial service that took place and some of the testimonies, including the full testimony from the National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, it's on C-SPAN. The whole thing is posted on C-SPAN, so you can just check it there and watch the whole thing. I think it was almost 2 hours long. Something that has always been of concern to me is the post-abortion situation that's out there. So many women impacted by abortion, all of us impacted by one abortion. But so many women do not know, if they're thinking about, God forbid, taking the life of their child, what they could be facing in the future. In addition to the loss of their child, there's so much more, and the negative fallout of this is just really, really powerful, and not in a good way. I'm glad that we have a special guest in studio with us who's taping for the Jim and Joy Pinto Show, of course, At Home with Jim and Joy. She is a practicing naturopathic physician and psychotherapist, Dr. Anna Nordin. So Anna, thanks for joining us, first of all. And why is this topic so important to you?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here and to be able to share this and
thank you.
The hope and the good news about healing from this.
Well, give us your background on this topic.
I actually had an abortion when I was 16 and immediately knew it was wrong. Got pregnant again to try to correct the mistake. Was an unwed teen mother, so I can tell you the difference between having an abortion and being an unwed mother. It's totally different worlds, and the abortion has just haunted me since then. And so I healed. About 80% of my healing was done by counseling and workshops, and then I figured the other 20% of my healing would be from helping others to avoid the same issues that I've faced and maybe prevent them from killing a baby. So that's what brought me to this field.
In terms of the work that you do, how would you suggest, based on your own experience, how do you start the healing process? How do you know? Because I've interviewed so many post-abortive women and men. And if you listen, for example, to the March for Life, which I cover every year for EWTN, and you go down and you listen to the Silent No More testimonies at the Supreme Court, so many of them didn't even recognize that it was the abortion that was causing their life to spin out of control. So how would you recommend that people start dealing with it?
First of all, depression starts, and often, I'd say in most cases, it's not identified what's causing the depression. So I encourage people to go through all the different traumas they've had in their life, etc. And I, as a therapist, do go ask them about their abortion history. And more often than not, that's like a key. Oh, that's a big trigger. They recognize that once we bring it up and discuss it, and they had no idea that they were even sad about it, or they were just completely in denial and it's suppressed. So I think it's quite common, much more common than people realize.
And so in terms of, I'm imagining, as a therapist, everybody is different. And so how long did it take you to come to terms with it? And you said you're still devastated by it, right?
Yeah, years. Yeah, literally years. So there was a sadness initially, and I knew it was wrong, repressed it, came up again, and several years later, 7-10 years, dealt with that layer. And then my last one was like when 45 years after the abortion, it came up again. It's okay. This is where I'm going to do really deep healing and then go out and share my story to help other women.
Really deep healing, what does that look like, do you think, for people? Help them understand that, our listeners this morning.
It's painful, but but when you come out of the other end, feel better than you ever have. And so just taking a really deep look, soul searching, and what exactly is the abortion process? Is this a clump of cells? Is this a human being, a human body? And really looking at also the trauma that you were going through at the time, and were you vulnerable to being suggestible to have this because of your own trauma? It was just kind of an easy thing to do. So it's a total healing, not just of that act of abortion, but any trauma that you had prior to it.
Now, in terms of your work, you obviously work with people on this, but there are many therapists who don't even talk about it. Are you hoping for a change in terms of those who are in the therapy, I don't want to say business, but in the line of therapy ministry? Because this is something that if it's brought up, let's say if the patient brings it up, gee, maybe it was my abortion. I've talked to women and men who helped let's say a spouse or a girlfriend help get an abortion, and then they're denied. I mean, the therapist or the psychiatrist, the psychologist says, oh, no, that's nothing. It can't be the abortion. Abortion is no big deal. You're fine. Mm-hmm. What would you like to see your community in terms of therapy be doing with this topic? Because there has to be, this is such a huge thing.
Yeah, it's difficult because a lot of the more liberal therapists have had abortions themselves, and they're in denial. So it takes a special kind of therapist. Well, first of all, we're working on getting an ICD-10 code to identify it as a specific
okay, what does that mean?
Disorder.
Just break that down for our listeners.
ICD code is what's billed to the medical insurances, and it would be like grief after having had an induced abortion. That doesn't exist, and I think there would be a lot of credibility then when we can give it a specific and recognized diagnosis instead of just being chucked under the category of PTSD of some sort. Yes. So that would be the first step.
And what about encouraging? Do you go to professional organizations, let's say conferences, and encourage other therapists to talk about this? And would that be even welcomed in that circle?
Yeah, very delicately. I have done that, and I think that I did awaken a few people there. So it just takes some time. It's a slow process. But there's hope there. Needs some work.
Well, we just had over the weekend on Saturday, September 13th, the National Day of Remembrance across the country. And my understanding is that there's these events going on not only in every state in the U.S. of A., but around the world as well. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but this is where people come together to remember the unborn, the babies that were lost in abortion. And do you think that could be part of a healing process to recognize the loss in some sort of official way?
Very much so. Yes, when we see it being recognized by a large group of people, that has a great impact. And I hope the publicity is gets to every household that event takes place on September 13th every year. Yeah.
When did you start telling your story publicly?
Let's see, about 10 years ago. Yeah, I spoke on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, at a gathering in El Paso, and I just kind of took it from there. I got to the point where I wasn't ashamed or felt guilty or embarrassed anymore. Then that's when I could share it. But before that, no, I was quiet. Didn't want to be judged. I felt guilty, and so that was a big hallmark for me when I got over that guilt and shame.
Yeah. So that was very therapeutic and cathartic for you to do that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's starting to take care of the last 20% of the healing that I need to do. Yeah, it's just knowing I can help and others, save lives, babies' lives, and save mothers spare them from going through this.
Wow. Well, I'm really glad you're telling your story. We're going to take a break. We have, I think, about a minute left before we have to take a break, but just want to give folks, actually less than a minute, we hear the music. Let me give our title to our guest with whom we're speaking and having a very, very important conversation about post-abortive healing, someone who's been through it herself. Dr. Anna Nordin is taping with Jim and Joy for At Home with Jim and Joy, and she's also talking to us this morning about post-abortive healing and her own story. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning into the second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. And make sure you check out At Home with Jim and Joy Pinto, because our guest will be a guest of theirs. Her name is Dr. Anna Nordin, and she is a naturopathic physician and psychotherapist. And she has her own personal story that she's now sharing, thanks be to God, about the fallout from abortion, post-abortion syndrome. And Doctor, this is so crucial. I have a whole chapter in one of my books called The Abortion Distortion. And something that has upset me so much as a person with a media background, I spent 20 years as a journalist in the secular media, and never did I ever hear about something called post-abortion syndrome until I met some people in the pro-life movement, because there was an election coming up about a particular pro-life measure that was being put before state voters in Michigan, where I'm from. And then I had to go and talk, get this, I had to go talk to the other side on the story, both sides. And I started hearing about the fallout of abortion. This was a long time ago, but then it was not nearly as much discussed, thanks be to God, as it is now. I mean, we still need to, and that's why you're doing what you're doing, bring it out much, much further. But let's talk about how common is it? If you think about the number, probably we estimate 65 million abortions since Roe v. Wade, since 1973. Those are the ones that we know that have been actually recorded in, with the CDC or another official outlet. So if you just think of that number alone, the impact is huge. But how common is this problem of post-abortion syndrome, do you think?
Much more common than it's purported to be. And that's because there's still a hesitancy to discuss this with you. Keep the thing that harms the most after an abortion is being silent about it and having to carry that shame and that guilt. And another reason is for the not realizing how pervasive it is the society is not really accepting. They're going to tell women they're overreacting, they're too sensitive, and that's the last thing they need to hear. So they keep things quiet and silent, and that's what breeds the disorder, the silence inside their heart.
So what actually is it when you were talking about a disorder or post-abortion syndrome? What does it look like from your perspective?
There's initially some sort of depression or anxiety or dysfunction, inability to fully engage in their life and their work and family and friends. And the way the patients that come to me usually don't know what it is. That's the issue. But it presents just like if you had any kind of other trauma. If you were, abused wife or similar to that, you would have difficulties with your depressions, anxiety, mood swings, nightmares, and withdrawal, difficulty keeping relationships or being present. And so it's very pervasive, but sometimes I think the key is getting to the cause of it, and which actually was the loss of your child.
And so recognizing what was done and dealing with that. So you mentioned depression. What are some of the other symptoms?
Oh, I said anxiety, mood swings, the nightmares. I had one patient who would constantly dream of a classroom full of children, but one empty desk in the middle of the classroom. And she didn't realize that at the time that was related to having had an abortion. And then it became clear to her that, oh, yes. Yeah, so we could put our finger on it. So, yeah, emotional withdrawal, anger is a big one. And difficulty relating with children, bonding with children after that.
What impact does it have if there is an abortion in a marriage where, let's say, that both partners, husband and wife, agreed that they needed to, quote unquote, terminate the child because they couldn't handle it or whatever reason, God forbid, they give? Does it have an impact on the relationship?
It often ends the marriage, or there's discord from then on. I've never seen a peaceful situation after an abortion between a couple.
So what do we do if we think someone that we love is suffering from this? How do we know? What are some of the signs? You mentioned, of course, at some points, depression, mood swings, anger. How do we know for sure? It's such a sensitive topic, Doctor. Do we approach the person?
Yes. And if I usually will, if I get a lot of resistance and a lot of anger, denial, it might not even be the right time to be approaching them. Sometimes I just stop at that point and just say, oh, I'm here for you if you want to talk. It takes some time once they have the angry reaction for them to really come to terms with, oh, that's what it was. So sometimes you can just kind of plant the seed and do the initial talk to them initially about it, and that's it. And others will just start crying their eyes out the minute you mention it. So it just really kind of have to gauge it and how much a person can take at the time.
Yeah. I also know there's a lot of research, and I included this in my book that I mentioned earlier, Extreme Makeover, in my chapter, The Abortion Distortion. There's also a lot of research connecting post-abortion syndrome. Now, you mentioned some of the problems, relationship breakdown, divorce, but there's also connections with drug addiction, alcohol abuse,
yes.
and other problems, correct?
Thanks for mentioning that. That's an important point that I neglected to say. Often there is substance abuse after that, alcohol, even just eating disorders, drugs. It's a very common way to escape the pain that they're not even aware they have, but it's subconscious pain, and they just get addicted, so doesn't come up to the surface.
The anger is very prevalent. I just want to share a quick story with you. I can remember years ago when I was working my first TV job in television news, I had a news director who was very, very verbally abusive and would just break down and scream and yell at the least little thing. Now, it's a very tense business to begin with, but it was to the point where sometimes she would come to work where she had been drinking at lunch, or sometimes she had very, very odd behavior. She would throw things across the newsroom. And again, it's a very, very tense business to be in, especially breaking news every single day. But you just never knew what kind of mood this woman was going to be in when she came into the office. Well, about 3 or 4 years into working there, I was doing a story on, there was a pro-life event that was going on, and I found out that she had had 2 abortions. Now, at the time, I was into my own career. I wasn't even thinking about anything like this. I was so far away from the church myself. But looking back now, doctor, she had all the signs of post-abortion syndrome. And she had 2 abortions. She admitted to it.
Well, it's difficult if you don't know. You don't want to pry and find out a person's history. So you just know that they have an issue and they're upset and angry and hurt about something, and so it's difficult to broach. Maybe sometimes like a parable kind of idea, like you talk about a friend of yours who had an abortion and they're just really upset, and maybe they'll make the connection. But sometimes if you just confront them directly and say, "Did you have an abortion?" that doesn't always necessarily work. Just be like little few prayers, ask for an opening to, chance to really get to say the right words at the right time to them and get them to open up that Pandora's box they've got.
Well, it's interesting. When we were having a conversation at one point, and she told me that every year on the anniversary of the abortions, she has like a little event for the children that she terminated through the abortion. So there is some recognition at some level that this was causing issues in her life, but yet she didn't deal with it. That was the way she dealt with it, or she was drinking, or she was having these outbursts, at the drop of a hat. And you think about all that conflict going on, right? This must be very typical for you as a therapist to see this.
Yes. And again, it's not connecting the dots, as with the woman who was having the nightmares of an empty school, not connecting with, I really care about this, or I wouldn't be doing this, honoring them this way. And then it's just kind of like getting a little deeper, like, okay, am I actually guilty of feeling bad about having done this, and just getting down to the core a little bit more.
Yeah, you could see people pushing it aside, as did this previous employer of mine, because she would have all these outbursts and all these fits of anger and rage. And if you sat her down and calmly talked about it when this issue came up in the newsroom, because at that time when I was working there were several measures, as I mentioned, that were coming up for a vote. It was causing her at least to self-reflect, though, now that I'm looking back. It's very interesting, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And but prayer is so critical that they're just asking God that they will at some point be exposed to a story about post-abortion syndrome and something like that. And hearing someone like me tell their story, and I'm the person, it's just, you can hear this from many different people, but sometimes it takes the right person at the right time in the right place for it to really get to your heart, get through. So I'm hoping I'm one of the ones who can help the ones who are still resistant. By the way, I'm couching the topic.
I'm so glad that you're doing this, and thank you so much for joining us, in addition to being on the show with Jim and Joy Pinto that will be taped and aired later this week. So in terms of the most important messages, if we want to help women and families who are post-abortive, because there's a lot of men that are coming forward now and talking about this as well, men who were denied the opportunity to prevent their spouse or girlfriend from having the abortion, or men who helped procure an abortion, drove them to the abortion mill, or paid for the abortion. What are some of the messages you want to leave with our listeners and later on with the viewers of At Home with Jim and Joy?
To recognize that our society as a whole kind of dismisses the depth of what we're doing, or misses the reality of what we're really doing, killing babies, and maybe go a step above the society's attitude and realize this really is a true condition. We're killing a human being. It's not, it can't be candied, sugar coated or anything like that, and be non-judgmental. Like, there's some factions of society will be judgmental, and then that's really not, that's counterproductive for helping a woman to heal. Or it's just listen and realize that they're not really, there's nothing hypersensitive about this issue. It really happened, and she's really suffering. It's a real condition, and just to listen and be supportive.
But I'm glad you're going, I'm grateful that you're speaking in Catholic circles and doing good work there, but you're going beyond, because this is not it's a religious issue for us, but it's also just a societal issue.
Well, my patients aren't Catholic. They're every walk of life, Buddhist, atheist. So this isn't, I wasn't Catholic. I knew nothing about Catholicism. When I had my abortion, I knew it was wrong. But what's interesting too is I have women coming to me, just sort of, they sense me out intuitively, and they're the ones who actually have it, and we identify it. And I'm so grateful that they'll come to me, and because that might not have happened with another therapist.
Wow. Well, thank you for your work and for your courage in speaking out about your own experience, which makes a real difference. Where do people find you, Doctor, if they want more information on your work?
Dr. Anna Nordin at Gmail.
Okay. gmail.com. And do you have a website or Instagram account or a place where people can contact you or find out more about your work?
Oh, not relating to abortion. It's my general practice there. So not the website, probably wouldn't be too helpful. But I think that's it. Just the, I don't know my Instagram location at this point. I never use it. But so just the email.
All right. Give us your email again, though, because I know we're going to get requests for information.
Dr. Anna Nordin, my name, ANNANORDIN at Gmail.
Okay, great. Thank you for your work. This is so important, and I'm glad that you're sharing it with us this morning on Catholic Connection on the radio, but also you'll be taping with Jim and Joy for their wonderful program, At Home with Jim and Joy. You'll have, they're amazing, and they work directly in the pro-life movement, so you will be in good company. They're just amazing witnesses and for life and for the faith. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Teresa.
God bless your work and may it continue. And again, please look up Dr. Anna. She's someone who knows what it's like. She's been there, and now she's using her own witness to make such a difference. We'll be right back on Monday. Stay tuned. So grateful for the ministry of Dr. Anna Nordin. And don't forget, she will be on At Home with Jim and Joy Pinto later in the week. She's taping today, and that's why she's in studio in Irondale, Alabama. She was able to join us. This is such an important work. So many people impacted by abortion, and not just those, heaven forbid, who succumbed and had an abortion, or let's say a friend or a spouse or a husband, a boyfriend, that helped procure the abortion, took them to the abortion mill, paid for it, whatever. It affects every single one of us. And even with the situation we were talking about with Charlie Kirk, if you see some of these comments that are coming out from the left, and these just heartless, soulless comments that don't have any respect for life, simply because they disagreed with him and his approach toward faith, first and foremost, and also, obviously, life, marriage, the whole transgender ideology. Okay, if you disagree with him, disagree. And have a strong disagreement, but do it respectfully. Really, you're going to kill someone? But why is that? It is because there is such a desensitivity toward life. Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, talked about this at the prayer breakfast years ago. Right? Remember the looks on the faces of then President and Mrs. Hillary Clinton, the First Lady back then? They were shocked. Well, you know what? If you don't respect life, this is what happens. But thanks be to God, we have a God, and we are going to stand up for truth, but do it lovingly. More on that tomorrow, and how our Blessed Mother can also help us. Steve Ray will join us, and much, much more on a Tuesday. Ciao, ciao.